All right, so now we've made it to document E, which is page 63 of your Mini-Q. And looking at document E, it's going to be a study of the chronology of English mortality in Virginia from 1607 to 1610. And then whenever we talk about chronology, we're talking about the period of time or sequence of events over time. And when we talk about mortality, we're going to be talking about the number of people who were killed at or died at Jamestown during this period, 1607 to 1610. Now, this document is adapted, as you can see from the source information at the top here. It's adapted from an article called An Abundance of Blood Shed on Both Sides, England's First Indian War, 1619 to 1614. It was written by J. Frederick Faust, and it appeared in the Virginia Magazine of History and Biography in January of 1990. So we're talking about a secondary source document here by J. Frederick Faust. Some content notes before we go on. Explicit in the title, An Abundance of Blood Shed on Both Sides by Faust, is his opinion that relations between settlers and the Indians between 1609 and 1614 constituted a state of war. He's basically saying right in the title here that there was blood being shed on both sides. Not all historians and archaeologists of the Jamestown settlement would agree, nor would all agree with Faust that the starving time at Jamestown in the winter of 1609 and 1610 was so much the result of a calculated Powhatan siege as it was settler crop failure and Powhatan unwillingness to share precious grain stores. Another important piece of information on this document is that the purpose of this mortality chronology is to tally the English deaths and causes. Obviously missing are the Indian deaths. The truth is that that number is not entirely known. We do know that many Powhatans died at the hands of the settlers, sometimes provoked, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of cruelty, but we do not have an actual hard number on the number of Indian deaths during this time period. One suggestion of this chronology is that the Indian-settler relations were not so bad in the first 2 years, but then deteriorated in mid-1609. What is not shown, because it is beyond the time boundaries of this Mini-Q, is that the relations briefly improved in 1614 when Pocahontas, daughter of Wahunsenacawk, the Powhatan chief, married John Rolfe and voluntarily sailed to England. Pocahontas was very well received, but unfortunately died on the return voyage from England. This misfortune and the growing threat of the expanding settler population led to a Powhatan attack in 1622, where some 347 colonists were killed. And the 37 deserters in 1609 that are mentioned in the chart, which we'll talk about in a moment, the 37 deserters were likely Francis West and his crew, who we discussed previously in document D. So let's take a look of the chronology of English mortality in Virginia from 1607 to 1610. You have a year-by-year chronology of what happens to the population starting here in May, 14 May of 1607. 104 colonists disembark at Jamestown Island, so the population is 104. 2 die in first Indian attack, so it goes from 104 to 102. If you look at the difference between May and December of 1607, 104 arrived in May, and yet by December of that year, only 40 remained. And what it does is this chronology gives you a year-by-year account between 1607 and 1610 of the population, and this includes new arrivals, it includes people who were sick and who died. It also includes in 1610 the 37 men from Frederick West's group that we previously said deserted. So this is a neat little document that's going to show you the additions and the subtractions due to sickness and death for a 4-year period from 1607 to 1610. And after looking at the document, after you've looked at the events in each of the years that are displayed in the mortality document, you can attack the questions at the bottom. What is the total number of colonists to arrive at Jamestown by the summer of 1609? So what you're going to do when answering questions, you're going to immediately refer back to the document to answer the questions. And again, most of these questions, first three at least, are going to refer specifically to the document. Question 2, in 1607 and 1608, how many settlers died from disease? How many were killed by Indians? So you're going to look in the area 1607, and you're going to cover this area here, and you're going to read the details on 1608 as well to come up with how many died from disease and how many were killed by Indians in each of those 2 years listed. Question 3, what generalization can you make about the numbers and causes of settler deaths in 1609? So if you look at 1609 here, you're going to be going really from mid-January through August to October, November of 1609. What generalizations can you make about the numbers and causes of settler deaths in 1609? You'll have to do some math. You'll have to do a little mental math or math off to the side on the border here to answer that question correctly, but refer to the document in doing so. The fourth question after document E asks you, what can you infer about settler-Indian relations from 1607 to 1609? What can you infer? In other words, what type of educated guess can you make based on the document? You're referring your answer based on the document here to what were the relationships between Indians and settlers like in general from 1607 to 1609. Make sure when you answer these document questions, since this is the last document, make sure that on each of these you're answering incomplete questions. And when you're done with document E and the short answer questions following the document, we'll be ready to move forward and begin our bucketing exercise.